Tensions in the Asia-Pacific are reaching new heights. In Manila, a single statement from President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. has sent shockwaves across the region. At a press conference in November, the Philippine leader declared that if China invades Taiwan, his country must be prepared for war. It was more than a casual remark. It was a declaration with profound consequences. For decades, the Philippines has tried to balance its ties between Washington and Beijing, avoiding direct confrontation with its larger neighbor. But now the president has openly admitted that war in the Taiwan Strait would pull Manila into the conflict, and the world is watching closely. Marcos's words, carried by major outlets such as CNN and AFP, were blunt and chilling. If war breaks out over Taiwan, the Philippines cannot stay neutral. Whether we want it or not, we must be ready. China's response was swift. Beijing's Ministry of Foreign Affairs accused the Philippines of playing with fire, warning that aligning with Taiwan's defense was a provocation that could bring devastating consequences. For the Philippines, the risks are enormous. The nation of more than 115 million people lies just 200 kilometers from Taiwan's southern shores. Any military conflict in the Taiwan Strait would unfold almost on Manila's doorstep. But why did Marcos make such a dangerous statement? To answer that, we must look back at history and the long struggle of the Philippines to define its role between great powers. The Philippines has always been at the crossroads of global strategy. From Spanish colonization to American control, the archipelago has been seen as a prize for its geography. Its location connects the South China Sea, the Pacific Ocean, and the vital Luzon Strait, a maritime corridor that could determine the outcome of any future conflict in Asia. During the Cold War, U.S. military bases at Subic Bay and Clark Air Base made the Philippines the backbone of America's Asian presence. Warships patrolled its waters, aircraft roared across its skies, and tens of thousands of U.S. personnel lived in its towns. But in 1992, after nearly a century, U.S. forces withdrew. The Philippines was left to chart its own course. Yet history did not stand still. China, once distant, began asserting sweeping claims over the South China Sea. Despite a 2016 ruling from The Hague rejecting Beijing's claims, Chinese ships continued to swarm disputed waters, harassing Philippine fishermen and patrol boats. By the time Marcos was elected in 2022, the balance had shifted. The Philippines could no longer ignore its vulnerability. Strengthening ties with the United States became a necessity, not a choice. Geography makes the Philippines central to any Taiwan crisis. The Bashi Channel, a narrow stretch of sea between Taiwan and the northernmost Philippine province of Batanes, is one of the most important maritime corridors in the Indo-Pacific. If war breaks out, this channel would become a lifeline for American and Allied forces, or a choke point for Chinese naval operations. It is here, more than anywhere else, that the Philippines would be dragged into battle. But this geography also makes Manila a frontline state, exposed, vulnerable, and within striking distance of China's growing military machine. How does the Philippines compare to China? The numbers tell a sobering story. According to global firepower rankings, China holds the third most powerful military in the world, behind only the United States and Russia. It commands more than 2 million active personnel, over 5,000 tanks, 174,000 armored vehicles, 3,000 rocket launchers, and one of the world's largest air forces. Its Navy, now the biggest in the world by ship count, includes aircraft carriers, destroyers, and nuclear-powered submarines. The Philippines, by contrast, sits at 34th place globally. Its resources are modest, only around 130,000 active personnel, a handful of tanks, a small fleet of frigates and patrol boats, and just 12 fighter jets, Korean-made FA-50 Even with ongoing modernization, the gap is overwhelming. Without allies, the Philippines cannot hope to match Beijing in a head-to-head war. This is why Marcos's statement is so controversial. Critics argue it risks provoking China while exposing the Filipino people to destruction in a war they cannot win alone. Yet Manila is not standing alone. The Philippines has reactivated its mutual defense treaty with the United States, first signed in 1951. Under this pact, an attack on Philippine forces, aircraft, or vessels in the Pacific could trigger American intervention. In recent years, Washington has doubled down, expanding access to Philippine bases under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA. Bases in Cagayan, Isabela, Palawan, and Luzon now host U.S. personnel and facilities, placing American troops just a few hundred kilometers from Taiwan. Allies like Japan and Australia have also stepped up, conducting joint patrols and defense dialogues with Manila. Even India has signed defense agreements with the Philippines, delivering BrahMos supersonic missiles, weapons capable of striking Chinese ships. From Beijing's perspective, this web of alliances looks like encirclement. From Manila's perspective, it is survival. But the danger remains. China has accused the Philippines of being a pawn in America's strategy. Chinese state media warn that in any war it is the Philippines, not the US or Australia, that will pay the heaviest price. Military experts agree. If missiles rain down on bases in Luzon or Batanes, it is Filipino civilians who will bear the cost. The Philippine economy, already fragile, could collapse under the strain of a war. And yet, as Marcos points out, neutrality may not be possible. If the fire is at your doorstep, you cannot ignore the flames. Even before Taiwan, the Philippines faces daily friction with China in the South China Sea, known locally as the West Philippine Sea. Here, Philippine vessels are repeatedly blocked, water-cannoned, or rammed by Chinese ships. The most volatile flashpoint is Second Thomas Shoal, where a handful of Filipino Marines live aboard a rusting World War II ship deliberately grounded to mark Manila's claim. Chinese vessels constantly surround it, trying to starve out the garrison. Every confrontation risks escalation. A single miscalculation could ignite a larger war. So where does this leave the Philippines? On one hand, Marcos's statement signals determination, that the Philippines will not be bullied, that it will stand firm alongside allies. On the other hand, it highlights the enormous risks of being caught between giants. Ordinary Filipinos watch nervously. Some see pride, their nation no longer silent, but asserting itself. Others see danger, fear that Manila could become ground zero in a superpower conflict. What happens if war breaks out? Analysts envision several possibilities. Limited conflict, China blockades Taiwan. The US and allies respond with patrols. Philippine bases are used, but not directly attacked. Manila becomes a support hub. Escalation. China launches strikes on US bases in the Philippines to cut supply lines. Filipino civilians are caught in the crossfire. The war spreads south into the South China Sea. Total war, full-scale invasion of Taiwan triggers US-China conflict. The Philippines, Japan, and Australia all become combat zones. Trade routes collapse, global markets crash, and millions across Asia are displaced. The stakes could not be higher. President Marcos's statement was not merely rhetoric. It was a recognition of reality. The Philippines cannot escape the shadow of great power rivalry. Its geography ensures it will be a frontline state in any Taiwan conflict. Whether this is deterrence or recklessness depends on what happens next. For now, Manila walks a dangerous path, balancing alliances, preparing defenses, and trying to avoid catastrophe. But as the storm clouds gather over the Taiwan Strait in the South China Sea, one thing is certain: the Philippines stands at the edge of history, where decisions made today could shape the destiny of generations to come. The question remains: will Marcos's warning serve as a shield to prevent war, or the spark that ignites it?